Hello friends and welcome to the Southern Mountain Kitchen. Today we're going to make soft pumpkin cookies. So everything you see on my counter is what we're going to use to make these cookies. These are just for the cookies themselves. There's going to be other ingredients that are going to be used for making the icing that goes on top of this. But these are an amazing cookie to have for the fall because nothing says fall like pumpkin, and these work so well just to give such a great taste. But these are very soft cookies. They make a cake-like taste, and the icing just sets them off because there's a bunch of pumpkin and maple and everything in here, and the brown sugar, it just makes everything work so well. So we're going to preheat our ovens to 350 degrees because these bake from 14 to 15 minutes. We're going to start out with 3 cups of all-purpose flour in a large bowl. Then we're going to add in 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, then 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Then we're going to add in 1.5 teaspoons of ground ginger, 2 teaspoons of pumpkin spice, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. And then we're going to whisk this all together because that's a lot of flavor going into this, but we want to make sure it all gets sifted through. Now, in another bowl, we're going to start out with 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1 cup of brown sugar, 3/4 cup of unsalted butter at room temperature. We just want it to soften up a bit. And we're going to mix this with a mixer before we add anything else into it, just to make sure that everything gets really incorporated and fluffed up, because we really want it to be that way by the time we add the next things. So just go ahead and mix this up and make sure that everything is really pulled together, and you get all around the bottom and the sides of your bowl to make sure everything just pulls in. So I would do this like on medium speed. That's just something that's a little bit, we don't want to overdo this, but we do want to make sure that it's mixed really well together. Now, after we get this completely mixed up, we're going to add in several things, but we're going to mix after each one because we want to make sure that everything really gets in there and it's all incorporated before we add anything new to this. So the next thing that you're going to need are 2 tablespoons of pure maple syrup. And we're going to pour that in and make sure we get it all in there. And then after that, we're going to add 1 large egg, which is at room temperature. And then once this is in, we're going to mix again and pull all of this together. And then after this, we're going to bring in some pumpkin puree. And I suggest using good quality stuff because some of the pumpkin puree really isn't pumpkin. It's gourds and everything else they mixed in there to stretch it out. So find a reasonable, decent kind to use in this, because the better it is, the better the taste is going to be. So once we get this mixed up, we are going to come into 1 1/4 cups of pumpkin puree going into this, and make sure you get as much of that in there as you can. Scrape the sides of your container to get them out, and then we're going to mix this again before we add in the next thing. We just want to make sure that everything totally gets mixed into the whole bowl here, because we don't want there to be too much of one thing in one place and the flavors not actually mixed together perfectly. So once that's in, go ahead and mix again, and then after this, you're going to need 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and then we're going to add that in right after we mix this. But after that's in there, we're going to actually stir it by hand. We're going to ditch the mixer for a while here. So go ahead and mix this up before we add in the last bit. Now, if you haven't preheated your oven, go ahead and put it at 350 degrees. Like I said, 14 to 15 minutes to bake these cookies because they're kind of thick. So that is our 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract going in. I'm just going to stir this by hand because I like to mix it up that way. It's just a little easier to deal with, and just get that completely mixed in. Now, once that's done, we're going to mix our dry ingredients into the wet, and we're going to use about half at a time or so, just so it's easier to deal with and you can incorporate these a little better, because if you dump that whole thing in there at once, you'll make a bigger mess than I would. So just go ahead and put it in a bit at a time and just mix it in with your spoon. And when we're ready to put these on a pan to bake, we're going to line it with parchment paper, just because it's easy to clean up, the cookies don't stick, they cook really well. It's just no muss, no fuss, it's easy to do. So once you get this completely mixed, we're going to use a medium-sized cookie scooper. We want to leave some room in between these because we don't want them to actually cook up and actually touch each other. So I leave a couple inches between each one. And the good thing about these is they are kind of a thick cookie, but they do spread out a little bit. So go ahead and get them on there. We'll get them in the oven 350 for 14 to 15 minutes. And once they come back, they'll look something like this. But we need to let these cool before we can do anything with our icing, because if you put the icing on top, it's just going to melt right off of there. So we really don't want to do that. But we're going to go ahead and take these 5 ingredients and make the icing that goes on top of here. And if you wonder what the block is, that's cream cheese in there. We got some confectioner's sugar and just a few other little things we're mixing together that are going to turn into a really tasty icing, which really has the best taste. But you need to actually make sure your cream cheese is softened to room temperature. That's 3 ounces of cream cheese going into it. Then we have 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, which again, we have softened that up a little bit. And we want to get this all in there before we do anything else. Now, I'm going to use my mixer with this because I have this whisk attachment thing, and it works really well to actually just totally mix something like this up. So if you have one, use it. If you don't, work with what you got. But go ahead and just do this until we soften it up a whole lot before we add anything else to this. We just want to make it really light and fluffy. And then once we get this done, we are going to add in 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. And we're going to mix again. And after this, we're going to add in a pinch of ground cinnamon. Now, however big you want that pinch to be, that's up to you, because I put a really decent sized one in mine. And then whisk it again. And then once we get this really mixed up, the next thing we're going to use is 3/4 of a cup of confectioner's sugar, because that's the body of our whole icing here. So make sure everything in that bowl is smooth and mixed together really well before we add in the confectioner's sugar, and then we're going to mix that in as well. So go ahead and dump the whole thing in there, and like I said, 3/4 of a cup. And then we're going to mix this until it gets really light and fluffy and nice, and it's going to be the smoothest icing, but it has the best taste, and it has a hint of maple to it and a hint of sweetness and the cinnamon. It just works really well for these cookies. And once we get this completely mixed up, just make sure we go all around the sides of the bowl and the bottom, get all of this incorporated. We're going to put this on the cookies. Now, when you go to use it, this is a little lightweight when you're starting out, but it needs to sit up. So if you let it sit to the side for a moment, it will actually thicken up and go really well. So go ahead and put it onto cookies. You can put as much on there as you want. The thing with this is, the longer you let it sit, the better it gets, because like the beginning, it's going to be a little sticky. But these cookies are so amazing once you get this icing with the cookie itself. Now mind you, by the second day, these cookies have an even better taste because they've had time to sit there and do their thing. And I gotta tell you, this is such an amazing thing to have for the fall, or if you're having a party or whatever you want to do, or if you just want to give these as a gift to someone, they're really great to have. But they have this wicked taste that is so good when you eat them. And it's like one of these things where, like, I made them, they barely made it 2 days in my house because this huge batch that I made were gone. And this is what mine look like on a plate. And I have to tell you, these are good. So if you like pumpkin, you gotta try this. I think you just might like it. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. And if you get a chance, check out the Southern Mountain Kitchen website, where you can get a free recipe, check out the cookbooks available from the Southern Mountain Kitchen, and if you'd like to, you could order a cookbook at a discounted price, cheaper than Amazon, with shipping that is also cheaper than Amazon. So if you get a chance, check it out, and I hope you have a great day.